Good evening, panel two. It is fantastic to have you all here for our conversation about books with a kind of a wider lens on schools. The first panel was very much about leadership, and this is more about kind of school-wide books. And we've got an array of different speakers and different lenses. So let me just do a quick round of introductions first of all. Tell us who you are, what you do, and where you do it. And I'll do it in alphabetical order. That's okay. And please tell me if I pronounce your names wrong. Funmi, it's lovely to have you here. Do you want to unmute first?
Hi, thanks, Hannah. My name is Funmi Rotheray, and well, at work I go by Funmi Stewart, so I'm living to the double identity at the moment, which is quite difficult, making things hard for myself. But I am Trust Assistant Principal at a multi-academy trust in Bradford in West Yorkshire, and I lead on anti-racism and equality, diversity and inclusion there. So it's quite a varied role, but I think the main things that I do is support with an equitable curriculum across the range of schools, and also lots of kind of student-facing work in terms of our response to prejudice-related incidents and just making sure that that's really detailed and that everything's followed up in the way that it should be.
Amazing. It's great to have you here. I'm going to go to your wingwoman next, Natasha. Do you want to introduce yourself as co-author?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I'm Natasha Raheem, and I work in the same trust as Funmi, and we're both based in Bradford. The main part, I'm assistant vice principal. I work for the Centre for Growth, and the main part of my role is I head up Dixon's teacher training, but I also support with equality, diversity and inclusion across the trust as well, and I teach English as well, which also brings a bit of joy to me every single day as well.
Love it. It's great to have you both here. Lewis, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself, to everyone, who you are, where you are, what you do?
Hello everybody, my name is Lewis Wedlock. I'm a masculinity educator based in Bristol. I spend a lot of time speaking to young people, students, as well as educators around ways in which they can engage young men in the areas of masculinities in the context of education. And I'm super excited to be here, very excited to get into the panel. Thanks so much for having me.
It's fab to have you here, Lewis. Thank you. Sarah, evening. Great to have you here. Do you want to unmute and introduce yourself?
Yep, sure. Can you hear me? Fabulous. I'm Sarah Wordlaw. I am a head teacher in a primary school in South East London, Streatham. I am an author. The book that I'm talking about tonight is my second book. My first book was about diversity and decolonising the primary curriculum. And this book is about misogyny and how we can create an anti-misogynistic curriculum whilst promoting positive masculinities. I'm also really happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Sean, in brackets, that poverty guy. I love the brackets there, Sean. Do you want to introduce yourself?
All about the brackets. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean. I'm a trust lead in the Tees Valley in the northeast of England, where I have the title Director of Place, which sounds like I'm responsible for an entire area, but it's way more interesting than that. It's people, learning and community engagement, because clearly we didn't have enough acronyms in education. We created a new one. But in addition to that, I'm a poverty researcher and write and do lots of, particularly around inequality in education and how we help to both understand and tackle that. And that's partly why I'm talking about tackling poverty and disadvantage in schools this evening, which is the name of the book as well.
Awesome. It's great to have you all here. And we had a very southern first panel, all London. So it's great to have some geographical diversity on this one as well. Lewis, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. And if you've got a copy of the book, please do flash it up so the audience can see it. If you want to just talk us through sort of like how you got yourself in print, like what was the journey, who approached you, who published you? Share your story with us, please, Lewis.
Absolutely. So my journey was quite interesting. I am published by Sage. I'm a publisher, and it was a real beautiful moment of meeting my editor Amy at an event that I was speaking at. And to cut a long story short, what I was speaking about, my approaches, how I work with young people, how I work with educators, how I approach school contexts around conversations relating to masculinity, piqued interest, and we instantly started having conversations about what this potentially could look like. And it was very, in the abstract at the beginning, but what followed was a real sort of authentic and organic process of really writing something with intention. I think the process for me, I speak incredibly highly of Sage. They were and still are incredible in terms of giving me the space to write with my voice in mind, and to sort of continually, write from that perspective of authenticity and congruence. And so for me, that process was really organic, and it resulted in me spending, around a year whilst I was still working in third sector and still working in schools, putting this work together and putting this body of work together in a way that, adds to the conversations around masculinities in schools. But it was done in a way that was very organic and very much, paced, but giving me space and time to craft something with that intention. And so super organic. Met my editor at an event I was speaking at, and from there, I suppose the rest is history. So yeah, that's my journey into the space.
Love that. Am I right in thinking it was at our event in Bristol that you met Amy?
Absolutely. Yes, it was.
At an event, you might find a publisher. Like, there's the call to action.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was a wonderful sort of synchronicity, and now look at this. It's beautiful. So yeah,
Love
thanks
it.
so much.
And I think she was there because she had published other speakers at that event. She'd come to support them. So I do love the domino effect here. Thank you, Liz. Fabulous to hear your journey. I'm going to swing over to Natasha and Funmi, and you're going to have to take it in turns talking. So hopefully you've rehearsed this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story of co-authoring, and you obviously work together, but it doesn't make it any easier, I don't think, juggling life around it. So over to you two.
Funmi, shall I start?
Yes, that's fine.
So we hadn't actually worked together. We work in different academies, and we were asked to deliver training to principals and trust leaders on ED&I. So we started working in that space closely together. And I suppose very early on, we established a really strong relationship based on trust. And I think in the nature of the ED&I space, when you work closely with somebody, you find out a lot about that person. You talk about things that you might not necessarily shared with close friends or loved ones. And that came out. And through planning training for principals and trust leaders, something we're very nervous about. We weren't entirely sure where to start from, where to pitch it. And there was lots of learning in that process as well. And the training was successful, and principals, trust leaders said to us that it was amazing. There was talk of kind of, you should create a consultancy work, things like that. And I suppose for me and I, we thought about our learning, and the aim of the book is to equip readers with practical strategies. And essentially, the book is a reflection on our learning process and the way we've implemented training for principals, in my work with the trainees, Funmi's work with colleagues at her school as well. Funmi, is there anything you want to chip in?
Yeah, I just think reflecting on our kind of journey of working together, it was just really interesting to find that although we hadn't worked very closely together in terms of facilitating and delivering, the feedback that we got was really positive in terms of the way that things flowed between us. And so I guess that's what kind of made us realise that we might be able to co-author a book. And I think one thing that was really important for both of us was that we do both share really kind of similar values, and so we didn't want it, like, we don't want to become kind of like an echo chamber, and so we were continuously kind of seeking feedback that would help us to kind of grow and develop. But also, because we built that working relationship whilst we were facilitating training and whilst we were planning, we've become quite kind of confident in terms of critiquing and feeding back on each other's work. So that's been useful throughout our journey in ED&I, but was especially useful during the process of writing the book, because it meant that neither of us would be offended by any feedback that we gave. And it was really interesting how, when we asked other people, mainly our husbands, I think, to read parts of our book, they said that you couldn't necessarily tell that the chapters had been written by two different people, and we weren't sure how that was going to go initially.
And that idea of harmonizing voices, I know how tricky that is. When we did the manifesto with 128, I think it was, and it's gained that consistency, isn't it? But because you've had a voice of delivering together, perhaps it was just beginning to blend in how you write it. Am I right in remembering, Natasha, you were also on mat leave whilst writing a book?
Yes, that was a challenge. I just essentially started writing with a newborn on maternity leave, so a challenge there. But she slept well in comparison to my eldest daughter, so that did help. But yeah, a challenge. And a labours of love.
Birthing the book and birthing the baby in the same year. Well done, both of you. Sarah, how about you? And tell us about perhaps the link between your first book and your second book, whether it was a similar process, a different process. How have you come to write 2 books?
Yeah, so my first book was kind of during COVID, and at that point I was a deputy head. I'd done lots of work on developing curriculum, and I'd rewritten the curriculum at the school that I was working at, and had started writing about that, just articles here and there. And I was approached on Twitter before it was the cesspool of X, and someone said, "Have you thought about writing a book about it?" And I said no, and they said, "Here, speak to Bloomsbury." So I did a proposal, and that was wonderful, and it all kind of happened. This time was a bit different. As I said, I'm a head teacher, I'm a DSL. I've worked in schools for 20 years in various different capacities, and I feel that I have seen a real rise in multiple violence against women and girls, and children, really young children, being at the other side of that. And so for me, I started to kind of research and think critically about that. What is that about? What can we do? And I always think that where there is education, there is hope. So this time round, I approached a publisher and said, I want to write a book about this. I think it's really important. I think that, that we have an opportunity as educators really to make a difference within this space. And it was a different publisher. I did actually initially go to Bloomsbury with not really a full idea. And so that proposal wasn't accepted. Actually, initially my book was called A is for Allyship, but it ended up being called M is for Misogyny. And anyway, I kind of got a bit of a rejection there, really stepped back, had to think about what was the message I was trying to do, because I think I was trying to do too many things. Kind of refine the idea, approach Sage with it, similar to you, like Lewis, and the rest was history, really. So I wrote the book in kind of 7 months or so. And then it was published just before New Year's 2025. So yeah, that's my journey.
Love it, thank you. I'm keeping a note of the questions I want to ask you all in a moment, but I want to bring Sean in first. And Sean, you also co-authored, didn't you? So tell us about you and Katrina and how you to publish.
So yeah, we did co-author. So Katrina and I, and Katrina sends her apologies not being able to be here this evening, but we tend to try and do a 2-for-1 as much as we possibly can, and if not, we manage omnipresence together. Katrina's the CEO of Tees Valley Education Trust, where I work, and so it's always a bit of a win when you do the book with the CEO, right? Because when things are particularly heavy on publishing deadlines and other bits, you can go, actually, the CEO gets it. I don't need to ask for a half an afternoon off or something like that, because she's in the same boat as me. And fortunately, we had a group of trustees as well, and employees that said, actually, we're going to back you to do this book. I suppose our publishing journey was an interesting one in that we write a lot about this agenda anyway. And for full disclosure, I'm on sort of several editorial boards where I get to see proposals for the books, which is why I was smiling, because I think 1 or 2 of them sounded familiar when you shared them a moment ago. And we give feedback on that. And that's the easy bit, really, giving feedback. But when you're pitching for something yourself, it's a very different beast, as colleagues in the room clearly know. So my journey was slightly different on that one, in that we write a lot, like I say, on this already. But we just felt that we needed something that could be really practical and actionable for really busy teachers. And I suppose, to do without sounding pretentious, we found it quite easy to write stuff. But when you're having to frame some of those really difficult ideas to real world schools in busy contexts, that's a different beast altogether. So for us, that was a challenge, but Bloomsbury were superb at that and keeping us online. And I love a good Gantt chart, and I think that's what makes it possible too. So that was our journey very much. And I will just share this quite entertaining anecdote, if that's okay, which is literally we've signed everything off on the book. The biggest challenge was this: we'd signed everything off, and then Katrina says to me, when's the last moment we can make changes to the cover? And I just wanted to pull my hair out and say, Katrina, we agreed this weeks ago. She said, it's just, we might need to change a couple of things on the title. And she wouldn't go into details about what they were. And I just did that thing of, she's a CEO, she knows best, I got to trust her. Anyway, it was because the letters OBE would have to be added to her name because she got an OBE at Christmas, which I think is a reasonable reason to have to delay publication. There we go.
At least it was letters being added and not like a missing apostrophe or a typo or
Right,
something.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Or because she wanted a different co-author at the end of it to work with. Yeah.
I'm going to stay with the two co-author pairs first of all, because I think it's hard enough writing a book by yourself, but I don't think it's any easier writing it with somebody else. So Funmi and Natasha, do you want to just share a little bit about almost like your working methodology? Like, did you just split it and work in silo, or were you constantly meeting? How did you navigate the dual authorship?
In all honesty, it was probably a learning process for both of us. And I think looking back, we would have done things differently. But we had the proposal, which made it a lot easier. So we knew what our plan was. And then we divided chapters between us. That was our initial plan, but that didn't work out at all, really, because all the chapters need to kind of link together. So there was a coherent was coherent. So we did end up meeting a lot. Funmi was very patient with a baby. Whilst I had a baby on me, kind of typing away. But it was meeting a lot. It was reading each other's chapters. I think what we would have done differently is kind of one of the chapters in our book is about strategy in a school linked to ED&I. And I think if we'd both started with that chapter first and then worked backwards, it would have linked everything together, because when we finally had that conversation, it did link everything together. And I suppose it's ironic because in a school where you want to start, once you've got that and then work backwards, that brings everything together. But a big learning process. And for me, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've said.
Yeah, I will just add, I think Natasha's too kind to say that our working styles are quite different in the sense that I think I am much more chaotic than Natasha. So it was a learning curve, because obviously when you're writing by yourself, you can do things like write loads of random notes down on one page and then come back to it later. But I think, I mean, again, and I don't think, I wouldn't say we became frustrated with each other, but it was just trying to slot into each other's ways of working. And yeah, I think if I was to give anyone advice on working in that way, the regular face-to-face or for us Teams meetings are really important, because I think you can become kind of quite confused, and then every time we met, we felt better and had a better understanding. So yeah, I think speaking about it rather than kind of editing live documents is the way to go with co-authoring.
Yeah. But equally tricky if one of you is a morning person and one of you is an evening person, and all of that, isn't it? Like where we're at our best, when we prefer to write, is interesting as well. Thank you both. Sean, how about you? You and Katrina, so how did you navigate the structure?
Well, actually, I should have said this earlier as well. Added complexity for us, there were 17 co-authors on the book, actually, which is like a massive win, because, you know, immediately, like, the heavy lifting is shared, like, amongst everybody. The flip side to that is making sure everyone's sticking to deadlines and so on was really important. From our perspective, I mean, we cherry picked the authors, so we cherry picked who we wanted to work on it. It wasn't a, you know, pitch us your idea type scenario for this book. It was, we chose who we wanted to write it. We created essentially a crib sheet for people where we said, look, this is the structure to the book. Our book follows a very formulaic structure of what does the research say? What does this maybe look like in practice in your setting? And what are some of the reflective tasks that others can take to think about these themes within their context? And so that kind of flow went through them all, and that created a level of consistency and style, but it meant that people could still put their own character and DNA on that accordingly, right? But yes, it did mean some very pretty looking spreadsheets around Gantt charts and deadlines and other things as well. And also just kind of having a spirit of feedback where we could say to people, actually, that doesn't quite carry the weight you think it does, that chapter. Could you go for a redraft of that? But making sure that was baked in so everyone had plenty of time to do it. And because the majority of the co-authors were educators, we clearly layered that on an academic calendar and went, well, you know what, maybe SATs week and GCSE month isn't the time to be writing this. So that worked well. And we were very selfish about protecting people's holidays and said no one was writing in academic holidays unless they really wanted to. And then we had a WhatsApp group. That was a real practical thing of just sharing ideas and insights with one another, proved really useful. And that's still going today, actually, which is great.
I love it. And like you say, it is project management, whether you're managing yourself or managing a team, it is project management, isn't it? Thank you. I'm going to do a slightly different question for Lewis and Sarah. You've written from different perspectives on a similar topic, but a topic that's quite big, gnarly, ever changing, quite political. So Lewis, like, how do you decide what would go into the book and what wouldn't go into the book, and like when to almost draw a line? Because I imagine even at the point of like submission, there's still stuff changing around you. I'm just curious about the kind of the inclusion process or the editing process.
100%. I think it was one of the things that for me, there felt like there was always something to add and always something to kind of reconsider, which was useful and is useful if you're somebody that's just pondering the sort of technicalities of a concept. But when you're trying to consolidate something into a resource for people, it can get really dysregulated at times. So you're like, have I got this? Can I include this? What's the narrative, or where am I going with this? And I think where I landed for myself was, what could I speak to congruently, and what could I speak to from a position of both experience, but also from what I've seen consistently across the spaces that I work within, that I feel can be of most use to educators that will be picking up this book and delving into it. And also being really clear with the approach as well, that, and it sounds quite strange to say as an author, but this book isn't supposed to stand the test of time. It's supposed to meet you in this space and in this context, and hopefully provide a range of tools for you to use and develop in your own space. So that's kind of how I was navigating that context and those concepts. Because for me, I would have driven myself crazy trying to get everything in and trying to get everything, exactly as it was arriving to me conceptually. So that's kind of how I approached it in my work.
Brilliant, thank you, Lewis. Similar question to you then, Sarah. Like, how did you manage the kind of the what to include, what not to include, even how to sequence it?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Lewis said, I think, when you're researching into a topic that's about violence and misogyny and discrimination, it's heavy. And I get into things like really hard as well. So I guess in my head, I thought about what am I actually trying to achieve with this, which was I would love a teacher or a leader or somebody who works in the schools to pick it up and within 10 minutes at the very least go, because it's provoked a thought, and at the very most be able to say, I'm going to use that tomorrow. And I think with that in mind, it's about providing a kind of a good weighting of here's some context, here's some global context, here's some national context, but not massively data heavy. We know there's an issue. We know what the issue is. What are we going to do about it? And then thinking about, well, how can we then break this down into a way which is kind of palatable and people have real practical steps that you can use in your classroom, in your school, within your team.
Let me just pick up on what you said there, Sarah, about like the heaviness of it, and our artists across the room, like how you look after yourself in the process. So Sean said like no writing in the holidays, but actually there are re-triggering topics here. Like, did you have supervision? Like, how did you do your processing of your emotions alongside your processing of your ideas?
I mean, you should probably ask my girlfriend that question, because she would probably have a different answer from me. Yeah,
I think I'm going to holler her and ask her.
I wrote it in a short space of time. I went into the research, as I said, really kind of heavy and hard. It was difficult, but you know what? As educators, we do a really difficult job, and I think you have to have the ability to be able to step back, look after yourself. I'm not always particularly good at that, but have people to kind of talk to, and give yourself a little bit of space away from the topic. Again, I'm not particularly good at that. I did it for 8 months really intensely, and then now I'm trying to have a little bit of a break from it. But yeah, I mean, if anyone's got any tips, welcome to have them.
Thank you. Let me come to you for a minute, because like working together, you might have had different well-being challenges at different times as well. So how did the two of you look after each other as well as get the book written? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think we've discussed it. We actually have a chapter on this in our book, based on protecting yourself as an ED&I educator, because I think we both recognise that we have throughout our careers experienced difficulties which relate to ED&I, and specifically like kind of systemic racism and things like that. And so if, for example, we'd had a day in school where we'd witnessed a really, really severe like racist incident, it's just about kind of telling yourself, actually, perhaps after I've experienced this in the working day, tonight isn't the best time to go and try and write a chapter to inform other people about this. And so it's been really kind and like Sarah said, making sure that you take a step back. And then I think because Natasha and I work so well together, there are times when we can kind of recognise that the other might be struggling, and also recognising where one of us might be continuing to work on something when we shouldn't. So Natasha's always been really good with me in terms of saying, like, maybe you should have a break on this, or it seems like you're like feeling really anxious about this, so take a step back and we can come back to it tomorrow. Or if you're struggling with that chapter and it's causing you any form of harm, then maybe you should work on this bit on curriculum, which isn't having an impact on you in the same way. So I think having somebody to kind of guide you and to recognise where you're struggling is really helpful.
Yeah, I love that, holding the mirror up to one another as well. We've got a really good question in the thread I'm going to ask all of you, but I'm going to have a quick answer from each of you on this so we can keep to time. If there was one thing you hoped your readers took away from your book, what would it be? Lewis, what's the one thing that you hope readers will take away from your book?
I think for me, it's approaching the concepts in the book curiously and not furiously, and seeing yourself as an active participant in those cultures that you're trying to craft, not a passive recipient of knowledge. So that's kind of my message, or the overarching message of the book, for sure.
And I love that phrase, curious, not furious. We can get furious about so many things in the world right now. So thank you, Lewis. So how about you? What's your one thing you hope the readers take away?
I guess the space to be able to think reflectively and critically about both practice and curriculum. I think teachers are really good at thinking about what content are we teaching, but we have less time to be reflective about the manner in which we teach things and the pedagogy in which we teach things, and really thinking really critically about how do we do that in a way which is anti-misogynistic.
Brilliant, thank you. Sean, how about you and Katrina? What's the one thing that you hoped for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to give you lots from the book. What I'll give you about the writing process and the book as a whole, which is our concept of write to grow, not to show. There's lots in there that we really want people to take back into their settings to use, to develop. But when you're writing a book, when you're using a book, do it in such a way that it grows you and others, rather than just simply shows everybody what you know about that topic.
Yeah, love that. And Natasha, if you could answer for you and for me, what would be the takeaway that you two hoped for your readers?
I think provide solidarity for the people who are doing ED&I work in school, whether they're school leaders or teachers, and equip them with strategies that they can use hopefully straight away the next day, where they can make a real difference. And that might be through a one-to-one conversation with a member of staff or student, or something that they do in their classroom.
Yeah, love that from all of you then. So reflection, curiosity and practicality. As we wrap up, if you have a copy of your book in front of you, do you want to just hold it up so that people recognise your front covers? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love the phone one. That's great. For misogyny. Thank you all for what you have created whilst juggling life, leadership, work and everything else going on in the world. I do appreciate how hard it is, and I'm looking forward to finishing off reading them all at some point as well. So thank you very much. Do go and get on with your evenings, and I'll be in touch with the follow-up from the event. Thanks a lot for joining us for panel 2. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.